So one of the things we spoke about last week was the potentially or the problems at Airservices, whether they are or are not understaffed. So I'll just do a little bit of background for those of you new to this saga. So there's been a lot of incidents in the last year where essentially large swathes of Australia, the air traffic control effectively shuts down. And what this means is that rather than having a person in the air traffic control tower communicating with the aircraft have to communicate with each other in order to self-separate. And obviously, even though you can run the skies like that, it does tend to cause a lot of delays and cancellations and obviously isn't ideal. Now, Airservices say that these shutdowns are caused by, I think they use the word short-term and temporary shortage of staff. So essentially they're saying this is when people call in ill. These are like unplanned things that just happen. And there's not in any way an underlying problem at all. They do have enough controllers. But obviously a lot of people in the industry are saying, well, that's obviously silly because if you had more than you thought you need, then you'd have enough to cover. So there's a bit of a hoo-ha and a bit of a back and forth. Jake has got some fantastic exclusives this week on this. So tell us, Jake, the latest on this and the kind of reaction to it.
This came to us from the Australian Federation of Air Pilots. I spoke to Captain Louise Pohl, who's the president of the Federation last week, and Marcus Diamond, the safety and technical manager there. They've done a survey which has gone out to their members. They found that almost 31% of pilots have experienced delays multiple times per month. 72% reported an efficiency of flight issue due to contingency measures like TIBA, which is traffic information broadcast by aircraft. That's aircraft talking to each other. And most pilots see these as unsafe and inefficient. 15% have reported traffic proximity or separation issues within the last 6 months. The Federation is the largest pilots union in Australia, and it's basically said that they've seen chronic systemic staffing problems at Airservices dating back to before the pandemic. Captain Pohl said, quote, "We've had extensive responses from all our members around Australia that they are experiencing unforecast holding due to a lack of available air traffic control staffing numbers. They're experiencing TIBA airspace at short notice, and that's possibly meaning flights can't depart. And if they can depart, they've got quite large diversion routes required to go around that TIBA airspace. The vast majority of pilots have now experienced TIBA, where up until about 9 months ago, most pilots didn't even remember what the acronym meant because it was so infrequently used." And she said that she's experienced that. She is an active pilot with QantasLink. She said that she's experienced that herself many times recently, where they don't have enough staff in certain sectors on certain days. And they don't tell you in a lot of situations, she says, that this is happening. So you're already airborne, and then they increase holding requirements. Now, planes will tend to carry extra fuel for contingencies, but if there's if the plane's especially full, if there's a lot of people and bags on board or freight, Captain Pohl says that they might not be able to carry much extra fuel above what is required. And if there's suddenly holding requirements put on these aircraft, the pilots haven't planned for this much fuel, and so they have to be able to divert to be able to refuel because they cannot continue the flight under safe fuel requirements.
So one of the kind of aspects of this, and some of the accusations are made, essentially is that too many people were offered or took early retirement or redundancy during COVID. And now they've got an issue that a lot of people in aviation there is apparently, at least, or allegedly, there is a staff shortage, and it is very, very hard to find people and bring them in. And of course, this is a very, very, very specialised skill. So they are particularly have it difficult. Chris, what's bringing you here? What's your view on this whole saga now? Because it's been going on a long time.
Look, it has been going on a long time, and absolute hats off to Louise and her association for doing the interview with you, Jake, and being so open and frank. It's quite scary to think that in a modern age we've got planes using T-bar to land and take off and navigate their way around Australia. I know that with one of the stories we recently posted on socials about Sydney being down to one runway again due to winds, a pilot commented on that, saying they took off without air traffic to the Gold Coast, I guess effectively using T-bar. So I think Airservices Australia probably went too hard with its retirement plan, not realising the dire situation that they would leave us in. And I get that being an air traffic controller is a highly skilled job that requires in-depth training and knowledge, and it's not something that, start work today and tomorrow you're clearing planes to take off. The education process involved is quite lengthy, but I would like to think that Airservices Australia are looking at how they can reduce the training period. I believe it's a 12-month plus course before they're even allowed close to an air traffic control tower. I'd have to do some more research into this, but what can Airservices Australia be doing now to reduce the training period, number one, to get people upskilled quicker and back out there? What are they doing? Are they reaching out to former employees saying, do you want to come back even if it's on a part-time basis? Airservices Australia need to do more work here, because we don't need unsafe skies in Australia. Australia has a long and safe aviation history, and we need to maintain that.
I would just say there that the air services are very insistent that this kind of workaround is, they say, internationally recognised and safe, which I'm sure that may be the case, but clearly it's going to be more difficult than something they have to deal with normally. And I think one of the points there that was made by the pilots union was that if they find this out at short notice, it's another thing to worry about. It's another kind of load on their plate.
Exactly. Also, in fairness to Airservices, we have to say Airservices does say that it is enhancing its service resilience by recruiting more than 50 trainees nationwide in the next 3 months. 80 air traffic controllers are due in the 2024 financial year. Airservices says that it needs around 800 air traffic controllers to run its network, and it has 900. So according to Airservices, it does have more than enough. Something that Marcus Diamond, however, did tell us, and it goes to a point that you've made, Chris, is that this is a safety issue. Because it is constraining, says Marcus, this decision-making that's happening in the air, that it's making things less safe. Most of these pilots, he says, are limited, they're being rostered to limits within the fatigue rules, which have expanded now with FRMS, the Fatigue Risk Management Systems. And he says, if you think about it, TIBA and the undeclared holding delays, this all adds on to the last leg of the day for their fatigue extensions, and they're now in a position where they're tired at the end of a very long day, and they have a limited decision-making capability because their airspace is being shut and they don't have enough fuel, or they've got less fuel.
One of the interesting things that I've learned covering the aviation beat for a few years is that I don't want to use the clever word, but everything is a very symbiotic relationship. Everything affects everything else.
Absolutely.
So if you have a delay or a cancellation at an airport, it's not necessarily the case that one particular thing led to it. It's a whole different thing. And again, it's like it's another problem. It's another thing thrown in the mix. It's something else to worry about. Like Chris says, I think just in general, Australia has a phenomenal aviation record, particularly in the kind of jet age.
Yes.
But I also do think that generally it does feel that there's an element of complacency, I think, slips in sometimes, because for me there can be an attitude of, well, there'll never be a major crash or a major incident in Australia, but that isn't necessarily the case. And I think that, I completely see why everybody's up in arms about this.
Yeah, look, I remember back to when I was crew, Adam, and one of the things that cabin crew are trained on heavily is CRM, crew resource management, and it's in essence ensuring everyone on the crew, from the pilot in charge to the first officer, engineer if there's an engineer on board, and the cabin crew are all aligned and working as one team, and no one is better than anyone else. And in essence, you never want a perfect Swiss cheese in that all of the holes of the cheese line up in a particular order to make a straight line. You want those holes scattered everywhere, so that to avoid an incident or a mistake happening or an occurrence happening, you want the holes not to align, so that there's a break in the chain and someone will pick that up and go, whoa, something's not right here. Let's take a step back and reassess the situation. So it's, I guess, part of the complacency that you mention is, are our holes starting to line up to lead to an incident? And that's me not going on record saying that Australian skies are unsafe. I still believe that our airlines, our crews, our professionals on the ground and in the air are just that, extremely highly trained, talented professionals with safety first attitude. But something's going wrong somewhere. and it needs to be fixed.
So that kind of Swiss cheese model is the idea that you have backup after backup after backup after backup, and you plan for multiple things to go wrong. But the issue is that as we enter this post-COVID world, the industry has become smaller in terms of numbers, efficiencies, inverted commas, have been made, and by doing that, you bit by bit chip away at those backups and make things a little bit more unsafe.
Absolutely. In my opinion. Sorry, Jake.
No worries. One thing that Captain Poll said is she is calling for. She says that Airservices should acknowledge that staffing is not at required levels. She wants an independent review of staffing requirements, and she says that she wants robust procedures to manage the airspace with current staffing levels while they build up required numbers. She says that she also wants to be seeing pilots notified appropriately ahead of flights that they need to plan for extra holding or extra flight time if there are going to be these delays, which is currently not consistently happening.
What I would say as well about that interview, which was excellent, is that often if you have a union, say, having a go at an airline, it's because, perhaps understandably or not, their members want more money or they want more perks. But this is an intervention that's been made purely for safety reasons. There's nothing they're getting out of that financially. They're just saying we are very worried, right?
Yeah, and Civil Air, the ATC's union, has also come out and said that Airservices is understaffed. And this is nothing against Civil Air. It would be easier to ignore Civil Air because Civil Air is the union for air traffic controllers, and obviously the air traffic controllers employed by Airservices. But as you say, Adam, this is the pilots. This is a union that is not affiliated with Airservices. It does not have air traffic controllers as members. This is the largest pilots union in Australia saying something is wrong. And there's no, as you said, financial incentive that could be construed.
If you are an air traffic controller or if you are a pilot and you've had first-hand experience of this in Australia, or if you just, want to give your opinion, you can email us at media@australianaviation.com.au, or, of course, you can comment on our socials or comment on the page. We always try to make sure we give these things a read, and we will get back to you.